Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Coming up on Bridge City News, a virtual gathering at the University of Lethbridge today to honor victims of residential schools. Plus, the Prime Minister announces Canada will receive over 2 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine every week in July and August. And the world's longest working DJ retires at the age of 97 after 7 decades on the job.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Hello, thanks for joining us. The University of Lethbridge held a ceremony today to honor the memory of the 215 school children who were found buried underneath the Kamloops residential school site. The remains were found by a ground-penetrating radar specialist last week. The U of L's Chancellor, Charles Weaselhead, who is a residential school survivor himself, says the university is deeply saddened by the news.
Of course, it touched my heart. It rekindled a lot of the memories, that went on through residential school for myself, And of course, some of us still suffer the lifelong trauma going through that experience. And of course, our children through the intergenerational trauma. Lonesome, abandonment, those kind of issues begin to surface to the top as well.
The virtual gathering featured a prayer and honor song for the victims. The BC First Nations chief who announced the discovery of the remains of hundreds of children at the Kamloops residential school says there's no roadmap for the grieving and healing work to be done. Chief Roseanne Casimir says the nation has been, quote, constantly, collectively grappling with the heart-wrenching truth brought to light, end quote. Last week, the remains of more than 200 children, some as young as 3 years old, had been found using ground-penetrating radar. Since then, steady streams of people have stopped by to pay their respects at the former Kamloops Indian residential school. They have left flowers, shoes, and stuffed animals at the memorial to the children who died and the residential school survivors. The United Nations Human Rights Special Rapporteurs say Canada and the Catholic Church should act quickly to conduct a thorough investigation into the Kamloops site. The rapporteurs are also calling on Ottawa to undertake similar investigations at all other former Indigenous residential schools across the country. The experts recommend conducting criminal investigations into all suspicious deaths and allegations of torture and sexual violence against children kept in the residential schools. Meanwhile, Nova Scotia's Sabagadinagi First Nation says it will begin an investigation this weekend on the grounds of a former residential school in that province. Chief Mike Sack says the work at the former Shuben Akadi Indian residential school site has been top of mind for many of years. He says the recent discovery at the former residential school in Kamloops has brought a renewed sense of urgency. The band says researchers with St. Mary's University will use several techniques, including ground-penetrating radar, to determine if there is any burial evidence at the site. The school opened in 1930 and took students from all 3 maritime provinces and a reserve in Quebec. Newfoundland and Labrador is moving ahead with plans to drop references to Indigenous people as, quote, savages from its 400-year-old coat of arms. Premier Andrew Furey says a formal notice was submitted yesterday to the legislature. It comes after a discussion with Indigenous leaders about the discovery last week in BC. It's been almost 3 years since the province's governing Liberals said they would drop the archaic description and redesign that coat of arms. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada will receive over 2 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine every week in July and August. The shipment will mean the 48 million doses of Pfizer that was promised will be on the ground in Canada by the end of August. Trudeau says 65% of eligible Canadians have now received at least 1 dose of a COVID vaccine.
Given the demand for these vaccines, we've also negotiated an option for 3 million more Pfizer doses to be delivered in September. We'll keep getting shipments secured until everyone can get their shots. But at the pace we're going, that target is well within reach. 65% of eligible Canadians have now received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. That makes Canada the G20 country with the highest percentage of the population with a first shot. That is really encouraging. Because the more people are vaccinated, the safer we all are, and the closer we all get to being through this crisis.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says he and his ministers made every reasonable effort to comply with health rules during a whiskey drinks dinner on the patio in the infamous Sky Palace. The opposition, NDP, and former members of Kenney's United Conservative Caucus say the event reinforces that Kenney and his government believe they are above COVID-19 restrictions. The debate surrounds photos surreptitiously taken of the dinner that Kenney held Tuesday night outside his temporary office on the top floor of the federal building. Kenney said yesterday that they were under the 10-person gathering limit, but he didn't address that the dinner appeared not to follow other safety measures, such as distancing.
Less than a month ago, Jason Kenney publicly vowed that if any of his MLAs were caught violating public health orders or encouraging others to do so, that they would be expelled from his caucus. It's clear that was another lie. The Premier and his three favorite ministers, including the Health Minister, completely disregarded public health orders and encouraged several other people to do so as well. It's time for Jason Kenney to be accountable.
For our poll question this week, we asked if you're happy about the Alberta government's Open for Summer plan. Close to 65% said they are happy with it, and just over 35% decided they weren't too pleased with the plan. Make sure you log on to bridgecitynews.ca again on Monday for our next poll question. The Lethbridge Police Service Priority Crimes Unit arrested a man on outstanding warrants on Thursday and in the process seized a significant quantity of methamphetamine. The Lethbridge man was found to be in possession of 219 grams of meth valued at more than $13,000, as well as a small amount of suspected ecstasy. Robert Kenneth Lang, 31, has been charged with possession for the purpose of trafficking and possession of a controlled substance. He was remanded into custody to appear in court earlier today. With the government of Alberta announcing the easing of COVID restrictions in the near future, the City of Lethbridge is waiving the normal deadlines for the Community Event Support Grant and allowing applications to apply on an ongoing basis throughout the summer. The next deadline for scheduled was for July 31st. However, with the possibility of events being allowed prior to that date, groups can access event funding support should they decide to proceed with events. The grant normally has application deadlines 4 times throughout the year. The maximum available is $7,500 per event. The application and information can be found at lethbridge.ca/grants. With the cancellation of the Canada Day festivities and fireworks, the City of Lethbridge is asking the community to take a different approach when celebrating this year. Alternative options include decorating your sidewalk, a Canada Day barbecue in a bag, and celebrating Indigenous culture at the Yates Theatre. You can pick up a Canada Day activity bag and booklet that includes a full list of Canadian-themed activities around Lethbridge. A new program is encouraging young artists to get inspired by nature. The Helen Schuler Nature Center is looking for artists under 18 to showcase their work in the Inspired by Nature Youth Art Exhibition. Art can include anything from drawings, paintings, and all the way to photography and music. A spokesperson with the Nature Center says the community art gallery is constantly changing with new pieces created by artists living in the community.
So the Community Art Gallery here at the Helen Schuler Nature Center is a fantastic opportunity for emerging and established artists to showcase their work here at the center. We have a really active exhibition program that runs throughout the year. The Community Art Gallery program generally has exhibits of about 8 weeks in length. So that gives us multiple exhibits over the course of the year. So there's always something neat and interesting happening here at the center to check out.
The deadline to submit artwork is September 15th, and the gallery will be open for 8 weeks to see the pieces. Well, chances are you may have seen a hollowed out tree in Nicholas Sharon Park. This isn't any normal tree. Inside are rocks and pieces of wood painted with words of kindness. As Micah Quinn explains, the students who started the idea wanted to show the community they're being thought of.
The idea for kindness capes came about 7 years ago after Lori McIntosh was teaching her second grade class, and her students made capes to signify acts of kindness they'd done in the community. The work continued as McIntosh and her students walked by this hollowed out tree in Nicholas Sharon Park. That's when they decided to pack the hole with kindness rocks to fill people's hearts.
We use paint pens, and that felt very special to them. So we have a list of affirmations and things that we like to put on rocks and that we like to put on signs and that we like to give in cards and people. So they use their paint pens, they use their imaginations, and they use their list of affirmations to do that themselves.
The students filled the tree yesterday with 60 items, and today they were almost gone.
Just seeing them take initiative with the project and seeing that they want to give back to all the people that use the park in the same way we do, I just find that it's that connection and that energy and giving back to the community that they're 5 and they can do it and they want to do that for their community. So I love that they do it, and they thrive on it and they get excited about it. But already by noon they were saying, has anybody found my rock? Do you know if anybody got my heart? As we were getting pictures in from social media, and just to watch them squeal with delight as even a friend's item was taken, even if it wasn't theirs, just to know that they've made somebody happy, especially during such a hard time.
McIntosh says she received a message from a parent whose child wanted to contribute to the tree and make her own kindness rock to add to the collection. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Thank you, Micah. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney said recently that Canadian Football League's Calgary Stampeders and Edmonton Elks could see full capacity fans in the stands by this summer. Well, this is exciting news for football fans. Young players are just as excited to get the season rolling. As Ainsley O'Reilly explains, minor football has an increased interest in Lethbridge this season.
The numbers are going to be crazy. The interest is there. Everybody seems to want to play football this year. All these teams are going to be back in action. It's going to be amazing.
The Lethbridge Minor Football Association says if the provincial government's Open for Summer plan goes as planned, they will have a clean season for the first time in 2 years. Special teams, no cohorts, pads on, and full competition.
It's crazy. People don't realize some of these small towns in southern Alberta, they're playing Div 1 schools in Calgary, beating them. The talent here is phenomenal.
In addition to the regular season, football camps for all ages will be hosted, including Calgary-based Raw Sports. They've organized week-long skills camps in Red Deer and Kelowna, but will be heading to Lethbridge for the very first time.
We're just extremely excited to hopefully be able to add to what's already a very built and well built and solid foundation here in Lethbridge, and we're just super pumped up here.
You're here to get better, and that's something where we want kids to at least come in and then leave after the week and say, wow, I feel like my tackling's gone way up, my blocking's gone way up, my catching ability, my running form.
In what could be southern Alberta's first back to normal summer, parents are itching for outdoor activities.
We are getting so many phone calls and emails about when is registration open? Is there any spring camps that I could sign my kid up for? People are looking for us and we're out there.
LethbridgeMinorFootball.org is a good place to start. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Thank you, Ainsley, and we'll miss Ainsley here at Bridge City News, as today is her last day before she moves on to CTV Morning Live in Winnipeg. We wish her all the best there and thank her for all her hard work here over the past 2.5 years. We'll miss you, Ainsley. Well, between the COVID pandemic and all the extra screen time, there appears to be a significant change as to how much physical activity kids are getting involved in. Daryl Devenish wrote an article in the National Post proclaiming that we're in an epidemic of childhood inactivity. He says sports is a dress rehearsal for life and that sports also saved his life.
When I say sports saved my life, I mean, this is where I got my confidence. That the playing field was even in the sport. That didn't matter what color you were, who you identified with, how much money you made. It's where everyone was the same. And I learned how to lose. I learned how to win. I learned that everything's not always going to go my way.
You can catch that full interview with Daryl Devenish following the business news. RCMP say 2 bodies have been found following a house fire in central Alberta. Police say the fire happened early Wednesday in the Buck Lake area southwest of Edmonton. Corporal Mike Hibbs says the home was engulfed in flames while officers arrived. He says the remains have been sent to the medical examiner's office for identification. Well, here's a feel-good news story. A woman from Ventura, California was reunited with a wallet she lost 46 years ago after an employee working on remodeling Southern California's historic Majestic Ventura Theater discovered it inside a crawl space.
Oh my God, my mother. Oh, I'm shaking. These are my good friends from high school.
Do you remember the night you lost it?
Yes, I do.
And what were you doing there?
We were watching a movie. It was a movie theater back then.
The other day, one of our employees were changing some light bulbs and the chandelier dropped a couple inches. Here and way, way over there. You can't even see the chandelier.
Oh my Lord.
I saw a little red wallet.
It's really wonderful. It really is. I'm kind of emotional. This is just pictures of my mom, which was really sweet because she passed away a couple years ago. Holy crap. It's hard to explain the feeling that I had because it's kind of an emotional one and an excitement.
That's amazing. I'm so glad she found that. To see all those memories from that long ago.
I just really want to say thank you for kindness, just to reach out to me.
She even had an old Grateful Dead ticket stub in there. It's amazing. Well, Ray Cordero considers himself the luckiest radio DJ in the world. In his 7 decades on the air in Hong Kong, Cordero has interviewed superstars including the Beatles and Elton John. He even received an Order of the British Empire for outstanding achievement or service in the community from Queen Elizabeth. Cordero holds the Guinness World Record for the world's longest working DJ. He retired last month at the age of 96.
I never dreamt of being a DJ. Never even thought of that. It's just that I enjoy listening to music. I'm now 96 years old. See, I can't go on forever. I better retire. So suddenly the retirement came into my head. Hey, yeah, you've been around 70 years on radio. You're holding a record, that nobody else did that long.
So sweet. Well, British Columbia has been experiencing some weather quite opposite to the prairies. A rapid snow melt or heavy rains have prompted flood warnings, watches, and high stream flow advisories. The central coast north of the Yukon boundary and most of the eastern length of the province are affected. Evacuation orders and alerts have been issued, and rising waters of the Skeena River washed out roads and are threatening nearly 100 properties near Terrace. Well, nothing like that here in southwestern Alberta, thank goodness. In fact, we've been in a heat wave, but will it continue? I'll tell you right after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The heat warning will be in effect for much of southern Alberta into Saturday. This evening, a few clouds. Expect some wind gusts up to 50 kilometers per hour into Saturday morning. A sunshine mainly throughout the day. However, expect some wind gusts in the morning up to 80 kilometers per hour. So it will be quite windy. Hold down your hat. 23 degrees is the high expected for tomorrow, though. Into Sunday, mix of sun and cloud, 19 degrees. 19 also into Monday, and then rising to 20 on Tuesday, 22 next Wednesday, and 21 next Thursday, with a mix of sun and cloud for the majority of the week. So those high temperatures starting to dip a little bit, heading back into the average highs for this time of year, which is 21. Average low for this time of year, 7 degrees. 35 was our high temperature back in 1970. Those were the records that we were trying to beat this week. I think we did it a couple times there. Lowest day on record for the lowest temperature was 1 degree. That was back in 1944. Sun rose this morning at 5:27 a.m. and sunset this evening right at 9:33 p.m. So just over 16 hours of daylight tonight. Over on the west coast, let's see what's happening with high temperatures tomorrow. 16 only the high in Victoria tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud. Expecting those high winds in the Juan de Fuca Strait, though, up to 60 kilometers per hour. Pretty windy there. 16 the high in Vancouver, chance of rain. Edmonton under a severe thunderstorm watch this evening. That risk could continue into tomorrow. Same thing for Calgary, 60% chance of showers with a risk of a thunderstorm, both in Edmonton and Calgary for tomorrow. Much the same for Saskatoon. We're looking at possibility of thunderstorms. Look at those temperatures, though, with the high humidity. 27 degrees, 30 in Regina with lots of sunshine, 33 in Winnipeg. Winnipeg also looking at a 30% chance of showers with that risk of a possible thunderstorm tomorrow as well. 31 the temperature in Toronto tomorrow, lots of sunshine there. Risk of a thunderstorm tomorrow in Ottawa with a high of 28, 28 the high in Montreal with a chance of rain. Looking over to the east coast, Fredericton's high 29 degrees. First time we're seeing those highs there in that portion of the country. Risk of a thunderstorm there. Halifax 27 the high, 26 in Charlottetown with lots of beautiful sunshine. 20 degrees the high in St. John's, Newfoundland with a mix of sun and cloud. There you have it. That is your Friday forecast. Statistics Canada says more people dropped out of the labor force in May. That includes workers who simply got discouraged and gave up their job hunt. The agency says the economy lost 68,000 jobs last month. The unemployment rate remained steady overall at 8.2%, up from 8.1% in April. Stats Can says the unemployment rate would have been 10.7% in May had the calculations included people who wanted to work but didn't search for a job. European Union and British regulators have opened dual antitrust investigations into Facebook's advertising practices. EU officials say they're looking into whether Facebook's vast troves of data on user activity give it an undue advantage. The coordinated effort represents an escalation by European regulators in their battle to rein in the dominance of big tech companies. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 87 points to 20,029. The Dow was up 179.35 to 34,756. The S&P 500 was up 37.04 to 4,230, and the Nasdaq was up almost 200 points to 13,814. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 81 cents to 69.62 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 6 cents to 310 US. Gold was up 20.83 to 18.91 US an ounce. Silver was up 36 cents to 27.79 US an ounce. Wheat is at $347 per metric ton. Barley is at $352. Canola is at $761. Corn is at $414 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 5 cents to 116.83. Feeder cattle were down 303 to 149.93. Lean hogs were up 13 cents to 119.50. And the Canadian dollar was up slightly to 82.75 US.
Recapping a top story today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is suggesting there could be legal action taken against the Catholic Church if it doesn't, quote, step up and take responsibility for its role in Canada's residential school system. Trudeau today said he hopes the church bends to public pressure before the government is forced to go to court. Trudeau also appeared to encourage Canadians to pressure the church to acknowledge the residential schools tragedy. After the break, I talk with Daryl Devenish, who wrote an article in the National Post suggesting we're in an epidemic of childhood inactivity. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Are kids any different than they were a few generations ago? Well, in one sense, kids will always be kids, but with the advent of technology and social media, there does seem to be a significant change as to how much physical activity our kids are getting involved in. Joining us to discuss this further is Daryl Devenish from FSQ Sport. He is a strength and conditioning coach and former phys ed teacher who specializes in youth development. Daryl, welcome to Bridge City News. You're joining us today from Toronto, right?
Yes. Hi, Jeanette. Thanks for having me on today. I'm I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Daryl, you just wrote an article in the National Post in which you write that we are in an epidemic of childhood inactivity and that there's a serious need to teach kids the fundamentals of movement. So tell me, how bad is this? You note that childhood obesity rates in Canada have nearly tripled over the past 30 years. That's unbelievable.
It's crazy. Well, first of all, the article sort of stir up some, some conversations, and you know, what's happened is basically, it's brought on the underlying issues around COVID, and what's happened is you can see all the problems now with what's happened with sports and physical activity as a result of COVID. So the obesity rates, they were bad prior to COVID. Like, these were going up. So now, for a year now, we have people that have been sedentary, spending more times on screens, not socializing with their friends. They've kind of lost their routines, and those kids that played sports 3 to 4 times a week, well, they're not doing that anymore. Even our kids that were basically getting the bare minimum, like walking to school, kids that were playing at recess, they're not getting these things, and they're sitting at home eating and not moving.
Yeah.
So, this is why the rates, have skyrocketed over the last year, but they were already headed that way.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, especially with schools being locked down. So kids aren't getting that recess time and they're not getting phys ed class and they're not even walking to school anymore. It's crazy. So it's not just the physical health challenges of obesity, but it's also, of course, linked to depression and poor mental health. Like, all of this stems from lack of activity.
Correct. And, a lot of that is due, well, if you're being sedentary and you're sitting around,
Yeah.
you're not feeling so good about yourself, it starts to affect your energy, your self-talk. Your self-talk becomes negative, and your mood, it lowers your mood. So this is where we are. None of us have been here before. Most kids, they've not been here. Adults haven't been here in this lockdown. So fear of the unknown, anxiety, depression. We have kids that are acting out now. They don't know how to behave, and if you're not comfortable, your clothes are starting to get tight. You gain some weight. You're not sure if you're going to be that person you were before. It's tough. Parents, it's tough on parents. Parents have to be home more, and they have to be, now they're the teacher, the phys ed teacher. They're trying to do their own work, and make sure they keep their kids entertained. So we're in a tough time.
Oh, gosh, absolutely. And I mean, obviously, getting kids involved in sports can turn those numbers around. It's just been hard during the pandemic, of course, because a lot of sports have been canceled. But this is something you're very passionate about. In fact, you say that sports saved your life. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
100%, Jeanette. First of all, I believe that sports is a dress rehearsal for life. Basically, there's so many lessons that you can learn from being on a team, working with others for a common goal, building, sports helps build confidence in yourself and your teammates, building connections through common interests, understanding how cultures work. This is how we do things. This is how our team plays. These are the little, rituals we have. It helps you learning about inclusion. Everyone's got to be included. Everyone gets a turn. Make people feel like they matter. Like, these are things I learned from sports. When I say sports saved my life, I mean, this is where I got my confidence. That the playing field was even in the sport. That didn't matter what color you were, who you identified with, how much money you made. It's where everyone was the same. And I learned how to lose. I learned how to win. I learned that everything's not always going to go my way. You know what I mean? And so these are the lessons that I learned from sport. I also, and I'm grateful for this, I also got an education out of it. I got to go to a private school, which had a profound effect on me. So this is what sport does, and this is why you've heard me say, saved my life. I don't know what I've been doing. It kept me out of trouble. That's
For
the other thing.
sure. And it's a great, like, you're basically talking about it building character, right? It's a good character builder. And it also opens up those opportunities, because it's true, kids can possibly get scholarships for better schools, which is, that's a real door opener, absolutely.
Well, that was a game changer for me.
So do you think,
100%.
do you think that interest in sports has dropped off dramatically for today's teens?
Well, research has shown that kids are dropping out of sports now by the age of 11. It used to be 13, right? So that's a few years back. I got three main key reasons for them dropping out. First and foremost, sports has become all about winning. It's not fun. If you're not having fun, you're going to quit. You know what I mean? And there's a big connection, and you kind of said it just now, is a big connection between playing sports and getting a scholarship or going pro. And if you start to realize around 11 or 12, I'm not that good. I'm not going to get a scholarship. I'm not going to, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to be a pro. And what's the point of playing? So that sort of deters people. And then, I'll talk more to this afterwards, is lack of fundamental movement skills. If you didn't learn the ABCs as a kid, run, jump, skip, throw, you're not having a lot of fun, because you're not that good. It's like not learning how to read when you're a little kid. You don't want to go and read in front of people if you're not a good reader. And then third is we're specializing kids way too early, and we're turning sports into a job. So by the age of 13, you're done. I'm tired. You're burnt out. So these are some of the things that are happening, and this is the reason why the team I work with, FSQ, we help sports organizations and parents and coaches build better experiences for kids to have active lives and quality sports experiences.
Oh, interesting. So you actually help kids to keep that interest beyond age 11 to 13.
And coaches and and administrators and organizations. That's what we do, and we got a big mission. To fix. I want to say, you're going to say you sound crazy. Fix sport, help kids with physical literacy and overcoming obesity and mental health challenges.
Absolutely. Now, one thing you note also is that public schools seem to be putting less emphasis and funding on education. Is that true?
Yeah. So what's happened, and as I said, I used to be a school teacher, and I've been in this industry now or working with kids now for 30 years. Over the years, the marginalization of phys ed at the elementary level, from let's say K to 8, has caused phys ed teachers to be generalists. So we don't have specialists anymore. We have generalists teaching fundamental movement skills. Now, if you're a generalist and you're not equipped with the right tools, or you don't know how to assess, and you're not giving a quality experience for these kids, and it's kind of like having your poorest teachers teaching kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2, when they need the strongest teachers teaching kids how to read and write. Because if you build a great foundation, well, guess what? It's going to be easier to do other things later on. But if you don't build a strong foundation, that's where we're having the biggest challenges. And if you don't, the kids aren't coming out with being confident, competent, later on for high school. So these are things that help people become. They don't have to become a pro, but helps them lead to healthy, active living later on in life.
Right, because you talk about the fact that it's not just important for students to be active, but they also should be actually educated about physical activity.
Yeah, and what I'm referring to is we need to teach when I say fundamental movement skills, just for people listening, I'm talking about the ABCs of movement, like running, jumping, skipping, kicking, catching, throwing. If you don't learn these skills, well, you got problems. And this is where, if you build the confidence in the kids at an early stage, and you make sure that everyone gets it, the chances are they're going to have a better sport experience later on. They'll be open to trying more things. Like if someone says, hey, we're going to go play with the soccer ball later on today, and you have those skills a little bit, you have the basics, you'll be like, yeah, I'll come out. But if you don't have those skills, you're not going to come. And that's what we're not helping with the kids at the elementary stage. And that's the biggest challenge is we haven't equipped the teachers with the tools, and I said back to the generalist comment, with the tools to assess these kids and give them the best experience so they leave grade school with these being competent or at least proficient in these fundamental movement skills.
Now, we all know, of course, that like playing some sports can be very expensive, and it can certainly be a barrier to low income or even sometimes middle income families to put their kids in those organized sports. So any thoughts on solutions to this?
Yeah, this is, you know what, I hear this a lot, and, you know, we live in I hate to say it now, we live in a pay-for-play society. If you want your kid to learn how to play volleyball or basketball, you can't rely on the school system to teach them. They're not getting those skills there. So you got to go find a club. You got to go find, you know, like some coach to train them up and be proficient in volleyball. Okay. So one of the things we suggest is, you know, in some communities, check out the recreational center, like the Parks and Recs. Parents, they have to sort of be involved now. They might have to play with them. They might have to set them up with their friends in games, after school programs. And then these are things where it's not so much about being competitive. It's just a place to go and play some pickup basketball or learn how to play some soccer or spike ball. So these are some of the solutions that we're having. It's like not necessarily on a club team like a basketball team, but it's like it's just pickup and it's games. And this is how you can expose people to, you know, getting confident, you know, but it starts with the community and everybody sort of being on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What about kids that might be overweight or even parents of kids who are overweight and they're thinking to themselves, you know, it might be too late to do anything about this. Any advice for those folks?
Sharon, it's never too late. First of all, never too late. So first of all, it starts with changing your mindset. You gotta have first you gotta want to do it, and this starts with, you know, changing habits. You know, who do we want to be? We want to be a healthy family. Well, what does that mean? Well, a healthy family, we're going to go for a walk every day, guys. We're going to drink more water. We're going to make sure we get good sleep. We're going to start to eat cleaner, right? And we're going to manage our screen time now. So this starts with everybody's alignment in the home. It starts with, you know, taking action. Like first there's awareness, then you got to come up with a strategy, and then there's an action plan. And that's what I'm basically trying to get the schools to do now is we need organizational alignment. You know, everybody's got to be on the same page. Teachers have to recognize how important this is and why they're doing it. So it gets done. Because if we just say, yeah, you should do this, it doesn't get done. And there's a lot of good teachers, and there's a lot of teachers that aren't doing it. They may not have the tools for whatever reason, or they don't have the passion, but we are not setting our kids up for success. If, you know, and that goes at home. Parents have to step up, teachers have to step up, you know, administrators, we all have to step up. I'm not calling out one group, calling myself out. I deal with it with my own kids.
Right. That is absolutely great advice there, Daryl, especially for the families of the kids. Great advice for anyone, actually. Thanks so much for being with us today, Daryl. We appreciate having you on.
Thank you. Listen, I just want to help. This is a movement, and it's our mission to sort of get this going as many as possible in the best environment possible for as long as possible.
Daryl Devenish from FSQ Sport is a strength and conditioning coach and former phys ed teacher who specializes in youth development. Well, many of us love animals and have pets at home, but sometimes we may have more questions than answers as to how to care for them. Joining us today is Dr. Ian Gibson. He is a veterinarian with Ranch Docs Veterinary Services located just outside of Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News, Dr. Gibson. So good to have you on today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being with you guys.
Well, why don't we start with chatting a little bit about some seasonal issues for pets since it's spring now. So everyone loves springtime, but apparently pets can also struggle with allergies. So what are the symptoms to be on the lookout for, and what is the treatment?
So springtime brings a couple more allergens to the table. We've got pollen that's increasing, and that sort of can, if your pet does have a skin allergy, it can exacerbate it. And pets typically want to sort of lick their feet. They often scratch their ears, lick their abdomen. They might sort of, typical to humans, also start sneezing. So that's sort of the type of signs we see. If you're dealing with sort of a skin sort of allergy, you might be okay to give your pet regular wash with shampoo, often a medicated shampoo wash. And if it's something more severe, you might want to consult your veterinarian, and there are actually specific products that we can give that can help with the allergies.
Oh, that's good to know. I know, like, we as humans often think of ourselves as getting allergies, and we don't think of the animals. The poor little guys get allergies too. I know I have a cat that often sneezes, so maybe I should get that checked out.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I understand another thing to be watching out for is ticks, especially this time of year. So how can we prevent ticks from attaching to our pets, and how should you deal with it if they do get ticks?
So with the warmer weather, the ticks are definitely moving, and the easiest way these days to manage ticks are they're just using a monthly tablet in dogs, and then a topical treatment in cats that also generally lasts about a month's time. And those treatments just prevent the pests from actually getting on the animal, and they can't bite the dog or the cat. And that's probably the easiest way to do it. If you forgot to give your pet maybe those treatments and there is potentially a tick on your dog, you can just kind of gently grab it close to the skin just behind the head, and you can pull it off.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty. I remember our dog back at the cabin at the lake when I was growing up, and some of those ticks got pretty nasty. So I know what you're talking about with that. Now, we all like to spoil our pets since they are members of our families, and I'll bet a lot of us actually overfeed them. So how can you tell if they're being fed too much? What kinds of problems does this cause? And what advice do you have for pet owners to stick to the right amount of food?
Yes, obesity is probably one of the most common medical conditions we see with pets, and rightfully so. It's not always easy to know exactly how much you need to feed your pet because they're not able to tell you. But the main thing you need to look at is, the condition that your pet is in. We generally say if you sort of rub on the side of their chest, you kind of want to feel the ribs if you press firmly. And that sort of gives you an idea if your pet is in a good condition. The easiest way really is to feed your animal a good quality dry food, and most of those manufacturers will actually have some sort of description on the back of the bag, and that'll sort of tell you exactly how much you need to feed your pet per day. It gets a little bit more tricky if you're feeding, table food and things, because then, it's hard to quantify how much calories are in there. And then you might have to use a bit of common sense to sort of gauge how much you should give.
Okay, any advice on what ingredients to look for in cat food or dog food to make sure that they're getting good nutrition?
Once again, the manufacturers that make these foods, they're the scientists and they come up with a balanced sort of diet. I would say, a good quality veterinary approved diet. So meaning a vet has sort of looked over the ingredients and nutritionists have looked at the ingredients and they've deemed it sort of balanced. That's what I would recommend.
Okay.
There's been a slight trend in recent years to feed grain-free food. But there's actually a substantial amount of studies that now show that these grain-free diets are actually bad for dogs and it can lead to heart disease. So that's just something to bear in mind.
Definitely. Now, we hear differing opinions on how many times per day to feed your cat or dog. So, what is the correct answer on that one?
Most of the time, twice a day is fine, in the morning and in the evening. If you've got a little puppy and you know he's just a couple of weeks old, you might be better off feeding like 3 times a day. In saying that, a majority of dogs also do fine on once a day. There's not a real exact answer. It doesn't matter too much.
Okay, interesting. So, how often should pets go for a checkup at the vet?
We would definitely recommend an annual checkup at least, and that's often accompanied by, you know, vaccinations, deworming tablets, etc. If your animal is sort of towards the later years in their lives, you know, every 6 months might even be a good idea. Things change a lot in animals. They don't live as long, so often things change quickly. So, yeah.
So, every 6 months as the animal gets older?
Yeah, maybe towards the latter part of the life, you know, in a dog, maybe anything upwards of 8 years. In a cat, maybe upwards of 12 years. You probably want to go for 6 monthly checkups.
Okay, interesting. Now, can you explain a little bit about parasites? What are they and how do they affect your pet? And how can we recognize it if our pet has them?
So we've got sort of two groups, you know, external parasites, which kind of already touched on. That's your ticks and your fleas. And then internal parasites are going to be intestinal worms mainly. And your pet can pick that up from just going to the park and sniffing around and licking things. They can pick up eggs, and the worms can actually develop in their digestive tract. So that's why we recommend, you know, especially in the summer, to do maybe two dewormings. In the winter, you might be okay with just one or so.
Okay. How, in what way do they affect your pet? Does the pet act differently at all? How can you tell if he has it?
Sometimes a little bit hard to know.
Yeah.
You know, once the infestation gets really bad, you know, you might see things like diarrhea as the worms irritate the inside of the gut lining. And some worms actually suck the blood out of the pets, and they can sort of get anemic, so get a little bit weaker. Yeah.
Okay, so keep an eye out for that, definitely.
Yeah, hopefully we don't get to that stage.
Yeah, for sure. No, so what are the best types of treatments for these parasites? And is there a certain time of year that they come out, or are they just present all the time? It could be at any point.
Mainly in the warmer months, you know, the warmer months from now on, you know, for October, that's sort of the main time that they'll be active. So you definitely want to worm your pet, you know, probably twice during these warmer months.
Wow, okay. Now, what about vaccinations? How important are they?
Well, they're very important and quite topical in this day and age with us dealing with our own viruses. Yeah, we recommend you know annual vaccinations, and then as the patients sort of get a little bit older, some of these vaccines can last for up to 3 years. We do rabies vaccinations, and then there's a parvo vaccine, and also a kennel cough vaccine for dogs. And then the cats also have their own specific vaccine.
All right. Okay. Talk to us a little bit about spaying or neutering your pet. How important is this?
Well, we all know that, you know, all the shelters are overrun with dogs waiting for homes. So,
Yeah.
you know, the general recommendation, we feel like there's probably enough animals around. So that's one of the sort of reasons why you'd want to spay your animal. There's also sort of health benefits to doing that, especially sort of later in life. You know, animals often get issues towards the older years. You know, if they're intact, you know, infections in their uterus, they can get prostate issues. So there are some benefits with regards to longevity, which makes sense to do to spay your animal.
That's really interesting. What would the cost be for getting this done?
It really varies from clinic to clinic. You know, dog spay might be a couple $100, and you know, cat operations are generally a little bit less because they're a little bit easier, I guess.
Right. Now, I mean, Sometimes we think of our pets as our kids. So if we are parents, we all know we need to spend time with our kids. So what about time with our pets? Does spending time with our pets improve their health?
Well, we definitely know that it improves our health, but absolutely, spending good quality time with your pet at least once a day is essential. They suffer from boredom, they suffer from loneliness, and a lot of behavioral issues that develop is just due to lack of attention. They are social animals. My advice would be, rather than regarding you sitting on the couch watching TV with your pet for 4 hours, as much as you feel like you're spending time with them, they will benefit more from it if you actually spend maybe 30 minutes a day of quality time where you're absolutely dedicated to them, possibly doing training exercises or going for a walk where you're just focused on them. That's been shown to be sort of more beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Can animals develop habits over boredom, like overeating, for example?
Um, They can, if that's the only thing they can keep themselves busy with is eating, they might go down that track. Some of them develop other vices like chewing your fancy shoes or doing other things that you might not find helpful. So, occupying them with things that you'd like them to be entertained with is a good idea.
Absolutely. We have a cat who's constantly sitting at the food dish meowing at us, letting her, like, we're like, well, there's no way she could still be hungry. So we're just thinking she's eating out of boredom, kind of almost like a human trait, right?
It could be, yeah. So I mean, you could always get a few little toys. Cats like little feathers and things and they love chasing things. So there's a bunch of things you could probably try to keep her entertained.
Any advice for people who have to leave their pet at home alone all day?
Yeah, so that's a challenging, aspect of owning a pet. Most people have to go to work. When you have a young animal, so a puppy or a kitten, they often can't deal with that separation early on in their lives, and it's important to note that, and actually try maybe go home at lunchtime, spend a bit of time with a puppy, and that way they don't develop this sort of anxiety of being alone. And towards, once they mature, they're probably okay to spend the day at home, alone. But you just don't want them to sort of develop this absolute separation anxiety every time you leave. So there's a little bit of training involved with that.
Yeah, absolutely. They're like little children in so many aspects, aren't they?
Very much so.
Now, what advice or precautions do you have for anyone who wants to go to the animal shelter and get a cat or dog for their child?
Yeah, so that's definitely the first place I would go and look. Those dogs are really waiting for a home, and there's so much of them that really deserve a home. In saying that, if you're getting a pet for your child, and there's some other sort of considerations you want to take into account, depending on how small your child is. A very boisterous dog might be too much for a little baby, and you might want sort of a more of a gentler pet. Um, so I would probably recommend going to the shelter and maybe spending a day there with whatever animal you're interested in, going home, thinking about it, and then maybe going again and visiting it again. And it's a very big investment. You're going to be having this pet in your household for the next 10, 15 years. So you really want to make sure you pick the right one. So maybe a little bit of patience before making that final decision. But yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, and I've often heard that it's not a good idea necessarily to buy an animal at Christmas time. I think the shelters are kind of saying that that's a no-no. Why is that?
I think it's, when people get an animal when emotions are at play, it's much the same when you sort of overrun and you buy a new Harley Davidson and then a week later you don't really want it anymore. Um, so I think that's important for owners to realize there's a large sort of sense of responsibility when you actually get an animal and they're going to form part of your life. A cat can live up to 20 years and dogs can live up to 15 years. So you almost have to think years in advance. Am I still going to have the time? Am I still going to have the finances to look after this little fur baby? Yeah.
Yes, good point. Think long term with that. Any advice if you have a newborn in the house? I had heard that newborn babies, and it might not be safe to have a cat near them. Any advice on that?
It really depends on the cat. You know, some cats can really play rough, and they might scratch the baby, not out of bad intentions, but just playing. But you also get lots of cats, the most gentle giants, and they'll be fine with a little baby. I don't think there's any health issues besides maybe.
Maybe it was an old wives' tale. I had heard that cats like to maybe lay across them because of the warmth and it could suffocate them. So,
Not that I've heard.
all right. Well, it looks like we are out of time, but thanks so much for being with us today, Dr. Gibson.
No, it's a pleasure. It was good chatting to you guys.
Thank you. Dr. Ian Gibson is a veterinarian with Ranch Docs Veterinary Services located just outside of Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.